Have you ever looked at someone you deeply trusted and quietly wondered, when did they start seeing me as expendable? That question echoed in my mind the moment I watched the video my wife sent me. In it, she smiled, relaxed, radiant, wine, glass in hand, as if she had just returned from a long-awaited victory. Her message was simple. "I'm with Miguel now. I've already moved the funds, you'll be fine." Behind her, a luxury hotel suite I didn't recognize. She had told me she was going to a wellness retreat in Santa Barbara with friends. But the skyline outside the window wasn't California, it was Mexico City, and the bracelet on her wrist? I had never bought it. I didn't react with rage. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even reply. I just set down the phone, walked into my home office, and opened a folder I had quietly prepared months ago. A folder titled, "If Elena Betrays." She thought I would break down. She assumed I had no idea. But what she didn't know was that I had seen the signs, and while she was planning her exit, I had already begun preparing for justice. This isn't a story about revenge. This is a story about clarity. It hadn't happened overnight. Looking back, the unraveling of my marriage began not with a dramatic affair or explosive argument, but in quiet moments, subtle shifts in tone, pauses in conversations that used to flow, smiles that no longer reached the eyes. At first, I told myself it was stress. Elena had recently expanded her business, a holistic wellness brand she'd grown from Instagram posts into a full-fledged coaching platform. There were late-night Zoom calls, weekend retreats, and endless collaborations with energy mentors and quantum healers. She said it was temporary, just part of the next phase. But something felt different. I remember one Sunday morning, I had made her favorite breakfast, sourdough toast with avocado and lime, but she barely touched it. She was scrolling her phone, laughing at something I couldn't see. When I asked, she locked the screen and changed the subject. That laugh, so free, so intimate, it hadn't been directed at me in a long time. I noticed she'd started traveling more frequently. Wellness conferences in cities that didn't appear on the retreat website. Sometimes she returned, distant, distracted, other times overly affectionate, as if trying to balance some unspoken guilt. I work in fintech. My mind is wired to see inconsistencies, to flag anomalies. I'd spent a decade analyzing behavioral patterns in financial data, transactions, deviations, irregularities that others overlooked. And now those instincts were triggering at home. Elena's credit card showed charges at rooftop lounges in Mexico City. Even though she said she'd been visiting her sister in Arizona, there were Uber receipts from luxury hotels I'd never heard of. Her wardrobe changed. Designer labels she used to scoff at now filled our closet. She said it was all for brand partnerships, but there were no posts to show for them. At first, I didn't confront her. I told myself I was overthinking it. That suspicion would only create distance, but deep down I knew. Something had shifted. She was no longer building with me. She was building something else. Somewhere else. With someone else. One night, as she slept beside me, I watched her phone light up with a message. Just a name. M. No preview, no last name. She rolled over and tucked the phone beneath her pillow. I stared at the ceiling for hours that night, my heart calm but heavy. This wasn't the woman I married. Elena had once been vibrant, spontaneous, full of wonder. I was the grounded one, analytical, precise. We used to balance each other. She'd bring the color, I'd bring the canvas. But now the palette had changed and I wasn't part of the painting anymore. I began backing up files. Not just financial documents, but photos, emails, insurance records. I created a private folder in the cloud named Neutral Ground. I didn't know what I'd find. I didn't even know if I wanted to confirm it, but I needed to be ready. I needed proof, not rage. The silence between us grew. Her laughter became more frequent, only when I wasn't around. Her body was present, but her attention belonged elsewhere. And yet, through it all, she remained outwardly sweet, playful, even, like a magician keeping your eyes on one hand while the other makes everything disappear. It wasn't until I found a bank withdrawal slip in the laundry, a transfer of $15,000 to a business account I didn't recognize, that I stopped pretending. The account was in my name too, but I had never opened it. The paperwork bore my signature, but I hadn't signed it. I didn't say a word. I just filed it away, scanned it, and added it to the growing archive I kept hidden behind 3 layers of encryption. In that moment, I understood something vital. She wasn't planning to leave me because she no longer loved me. She was planning to leave me because she thought I wouldn't notice, and that's where she was wrong. I didn't react the way most people might expect. There was no shouting match, no accusations, no sleepless nights filled with questions I already knew the answers to. Instead, I did what I'd been trained to do: observe, calculate, and prepare. Emotionally, I was hollow, but mentally, I was sharper than ever. The betrayal wasn't complete yet, but I sensed it was coming, and I knew that when it did, I had to be ready, not just to protect myself, but to hold her accountable without ever raising my voice. I began with the most fragile aspect of our shared life: finances. Elena had never been interested in our money beyond asking if we were doing okay. She left everything to me: budgeting, investments, taxes, retirement. She used to say it overwhelmed her, and I used to think that meant she trusted me. I know now that it meant she never planned to look back once she walked away. I created a new business entity under the name DM Risk and Trust, a shell company at first glance, but one that allowed me to move assets under the umbrella of operational reserves. I closed 2 accounts that were in both our names, replacing them with new holdings under the LLC, legally structured in a way that shielded them from joint liability. She signed the authorizations without reading them, distracted by her phone, her plans, or maybe just by the arrogance of thinking she didn't need to understand. I kept my routine unchanged. Mornings still began with our usual green smoothies, still made 2 cups even when she didn't drink hers. I asked about her projects, with real curiosity, listened as she explained her upcoming brand collaboration with a crystal supplier in Tulum. I took mental notes. Every detail she shared, locations, names, schedules, added to the timeline I was building in silence. Behind the scenes, I scanned and archived everything: credit card statements going back 18 months, travel itineraries pulled from her email metadata, screenshots of suspicious messages from her wellness retreat group chats, a notarized affidavit from a former assistant who had quietly left her brand after noticing financial irregularities. The deeper I went, the more I saw a blueprint, not just of infidelity, but of calculated abandonment. She had already started transferring funds months ago. Small amounts first, sent to a PayPal account labeled Business Vendor Expenses. Later, larger sums went to a new checking account opened under her brand name, one I hadn't known existed. I spoke to a contact I trusted, Claudia Vargas, a private attorney who had once helped a friend of mine navigate a messy divorce. Met over lunch in a quiet cafe in La Jolla. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. Claudia listened without judgment and said the words I'd been avoiding. Start documenting everything, and don't confront her yet. If she feels exposed too early, she'll cover her tracks. Stay quiet, stay ahead. That night, I created a master folder labeled If Elena Betrays. I encrypted it with a 3-layer password, backed it up in 2 separate locations, and made sure I could access it from my phone, laptop, or the cloud at any time. I wasn't just building a defense, I was preparing an offense. Elena, meanwhile, seemed freer than ever. She floated through the house like a woman reborn, dressing more elaborately, humming as she packed for another coaching summit. There was an unfamiliar glow to her, a kind of careless joy. It might have been love, it might have been relief, but I knew it wasn't for me. One evening, she came home with a white envelope, high gloss, gold trimmed, an invitation to a private retreat in Mexico City, hosted by a man named Miguel Reyna, who, she explained with casual excitement, was a rising figure in the Latin American spiritual entrepreneurship scene. He's helping people unlock abundance through sound healing and identity work, she said. I nodded. Then I Googled him. Miguel Reyna had no formal credentials, no real business registration, but a long digital trail of influencer connections, flashy cars, and mysterious donations. On a gut level, I knew he wasn't just a business mentor. I didn't accuse. I didn't protest. I told her I was proud of her growth, wished her success, and offered to transfer some funds to her business account to help with her upcoming project. She beamed with appreciation. I transferred $500. Not enough to notice, just enough to confirm where the money went. It was redirected the next day to an account held by Reyna Consulting Group, LLC. That was the final piece I needed. Not to hurt her, but to protect myself from the moment she decided I was no longer necessary. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I had just returned from a meeting with a client in Mission Valley when my phone lit up with a notification from Elena. It wasn't a text, it was a video, just under a minute long. I hesitated before pressing play, already knowing somehow that this would be the moment everything changed. She was sitting on the balcony of a penthouse suite I didn't recognize. The camera panned just slightly to reveal tall glass towers. In the background, definitely not Santa Barbara, where she claimed she was attending a mindfulness conference. Mexico City. I recognized the skyline from the Google searches I had done just days before. In the video, Elena looked radiant, hair perfectly styled, wearing a silk robe I had never seen before, and holding a champagne flute in one hand. On her wrist sparkled a diamond bracelet far beyond anything our usual budget could justify. She leaned slightly toward the camera and smiled. "Hey," she said, tone almost casual. "I'm staying with Miguel now, it just felt right. I've already moved the funds, liquidated the retirement accounts. I know this is sudden, but I'm trusting the universe. You'll be okay, David. You always land on your feet." The screen went black. No apology, no guilt. Just a breezy farewell, as if our 18-year marriage were a business partnership that had reached its natural expiration date. I didn't flinch. I didn't call her back. I didn't send a single word. Instead, I stood up, walked into my home, office, and opened the folder labeled "If Elena Betrays." My hands moved without hesitation. First, the bank. I called our financial institution and was quickly transferred to the fraud department. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'd like to report unauthorized activity on our retirement accounts." The representative asked a series of questions, and when I told her about the forged signature and unapproved liquidation, her voice shifted immediately. "We're placing an immediate hold on the funds while we investigate." Next, I logged into our legal platform and pulled up the divorce documents I had drafted weeks ago with Claudia. The forms were partially filled out, waiting only for a trigger. Now I had one. I updated the details, attached copies of the video, the bank notifications, and Elena's travel confirmations. I saved the file and set a reminder to send it to Claudia first thing in the morning. What struck me in that moment was not grief. It was clarity. 18 years of building a life together, of shared plans, dinner tables, silent sacrifices, had been reduced to a 47-second video message and a toast to a new beginning with another man. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What cut deeper was how calmly she had done it, how confidently she assumed I would simply absorb the impact and move on. Elena had misjudged me. She thought I was too measured, too passive, too buried in spreadsheets and risk reports to fight back. But what she didn't understand is that those same skills, the ability to see patterns, anticipate outcomes, plan for every possible scenario, were exactly what made me dangerous when betrayed. I reviewed our shared accounts again. Some of the transfers had gone through already. But thanks to the timing, midweek, late afternoon, and just before a regional banking holiday, there was still time to freeze the remainder. I flagged all transactions involving her LLC and any accounts linked to Miguel Reyna or Reyna Consulting. Then I did something that surprised even me. I emailed my firm's internal security lead, someone I had worked with on several white-collar crime investigations. I didn't explain everything. I simply asked, if someone you trusted tried to financially dismantle you, and you had evidence, would you strike now or wait? she replied within 2 minutes. Strike, quietly, document everything, get ahead of the narrative. That night, I sat alone in the living room, lights off, sipping black coffee. Not sad, not broken, just clear. Elena had made her move. Now it was my turn. She returned 3 days later, earlier than I expected, dragging a silver suitcase behind her and wearing the same silk robe from the video, now layered beneath a light trench coat. Her hair was pinned up casually, but her face carried a storm, one she clearly hadn't anticipated walking into. She didn't ring the doorbell. She used her key, still assuming access, still believing control was hers. I was in the kitchen when she walked in, the smell of coffee and fresh paper filling the room. I didn't move to greet her. She stood there, framed in the doorway, her suitcase half tilted, eyes searching mine for any sign of fear or retaliation. There was none. Only silence. "David," she said cautiously. "What the hell is going on? I can't access any of the accounts. The bank is saying something about fraud. Did you do something?" I set my coffee mug down and met her gaze. "Yes," I replied evenly. "I reported the unauthorized withdrawal. The bank froze the funds pending investigation." Her mouth opened, then closed. She laughed, but it sounded forced, brittle. "You're being dramatic. I'm your wife. I have every right to our accounts." I stepped forward calmly. "Except you forged my signature to liquidate over $300,000. That's not a marital decision, that's fraud." The mask she wore began to slip. Her eyes darted to the staircase behind me, calculating. She wasn't looking for safety. She was looking for what else she could take. "You can't prove that," she said, trying to steady her voice. I reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward her. "That's your video. The one where you say, on record, that you emptied the accounts and are with Miguel now. I've already submitted it to the bank and my attorney." She didn't touch the folder. Instead, she pivoted. "You've misunderstood everything. Miguel was just helping me restructure my business. The funds were going to be reinvested." Shook my head. "Into what? Sound baths and motivational speeches? Don't insult both of us." Her tone shifted again, softer now, sultry. She moved closer. "David, I was just confused. You've been so distant, always working. I needed something to feel alive again. Maybe I handled it poorly, but it wasn't meant to destroy us." That word, us, rang hollow. I stepped back. "There hasn't been an us for a long time. You planned this, Elena. You transferred money, booked hotels, bought gifts. You built a separate life while still using mine." "I was going to tell you," she whispered, "but you didn't." Her hand reached for my arm. I didn't flinch, but I didn't respond either. She dropped her voice further. "We can fix this. You're a genius with numbers. You can make this disappear. No one has to know." I looked her directly in the eye. "They already do. The bank, my lawyer, the fraud division, and soon, possibly, the authorities." Her composure cracked. She stepped back, blinking hard. "You'd ruin me? After everything we built?" I finally allowed myself a faint smile. "You already ruined it. I'm just documenting the damage." She turned, pacing the room, then snapped. "You think you're so smart, but you'd be nothing without me. I built your brand, your image. You were just a quiet little man before. I turned you into someone people respected." The venom in her voice didn't sting. It only confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't love turned sour. This was a person who had seen me as leverage, not a partner. I walked to the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. She watched in silence as I played security footage, grainy but clear enough. Elena at the bank, Elena signing withdrawal forms, Elena meeting Miguel outside a restaurant in Mexico City, handing him a folder. She gasped. "You had someone following me?" "No," I said calmly. "I had someone protecting me." She stared at the screen and I could see it. The dawning realization that the game she had tried to play was over. Then came the final blow. "The divorce papers are on their way," I said. "They'll be served today. From here on out, everything goes through attorneys. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You think you've won? I looked at her steady. I don't believe in winning. I believe in consequences. She said nothing else. Just picked up her phone, opened her banking app, and frantically searched. Where is it? Where's the rest of the money? In accounts you signed over but never monitored. Tied to my LLC, accounts you never cared to ask about. The look on her face shifted from disbelief to something darker. Hatred, maybe even fear. And in that moment I realized, she hadn't just tried to leave me. She had tried to erase me. But she'd failed. After Elena stormed out that night, leaving only the scent of her perfume and the echo of slammed doors behind, I didn't sit in satisfaction. I sat in strategy. Her betrayal, while deliberate and devastating, wasn't the whole picture. Something deeper had been pulling the strings, and that something, or someone, was Miguel Reyna. I didn't waste time. The next morning, I met with Marisol Ewan, a forensic investigator I'd worked with during a corporate compliance audit 2 years earlier. She was sharp, discreet, and relentless. We sat in a corner booth at a quiet coffee shop in North Park. I slid a folder across the table, names, account numbers, travel dates, and Miguel's known aliases. I don't want speculation, I said. I want evidence. 3 days later, she called me back. Her voice was crisp. You were right to be suspicious. Miguel Reyna isn't who he says he is. What she uncovered was worse than I expected. Miguel's real name was Miguel Angel Carrillo Reyna, and his Reyna Consulting Group was nothing more than a shell. No active clients, no tax returns, no declared income, just movement. Money in, money out. Often funneled through temporary, holding accounts in cryptocurrency wallets. What made it more troubling was the pattern. 3 different women over the past 4 years, all of whom were either married or in long-term relationships with access to shared assets. Marisol showed me the timeline. The method was chillingly consistent. Miguel would target successful or semi-public women, especially those who framed their identity around empowerment, wellness, or spirituality. He would position himself as a business coach or spiritual mentor. Then, through charm and manipulation, he'd build personal intimacy, encourage them to break free from restrictive relationships, and finally suggest financial realignment, which always involved moving significant amounts of money into accounts under his control. One of his former partners, a yoga studio owner from Austin, had lost over $120,000 before realizing he had ghosted her. Another, a therapist in Vancouver, had been manipulated into signing over the lease to her office space. In both cases, the women refused to come forward. Publicly, ashamed, humiliated, afraid of the backlash from their own audiences. This is not just emotional manipulation, Marisol said. This is financial predation. Then came the real punch. Miguel had a sealed misdemeanor fraud case in Oaxaca related to forged property documents. The charges had been dropped after the victim refused to testify, likely out of fear or love. Elena hadn't just cheated on me. She had been recruited, groomed, and turned into a conduit for someone else's pattern of exploitation. What about the account she transferred our retirement into? I asked. Marisol nodded. I traced it to a holding company registered in Belize, and that account in turn routes funds to a private bank in Panama, same one Miguel's used before. We're talking professional-level laundering tactics. But, she added with a sharp smile, he's gotten careless. When people think they've won, they get sloppy. She handed me a thick manila envelope. Inside were bank transfers, company registrations, IP login logs, and copies of Elena's emails to Miguel, including one where she wrote, "Once the money clears, we're gone. He won't even see it coming." That one hit hard, but it also clarified everything. This wasn't just infidelity, it was conspiracy. I stared out the window for a long moment, the weight of what I'd learned settling over me like smoke. My marriage had been ending quietly for years, but I had never imagined it would conclude like this, not with heartbreak, but with strategic theft orchestrated by a man hiding behind incense and mantras. Before I left, I asked Marisol one more question. Do you think Elena knew what she was part of? She hesitated. Hard to say. Some victims become complicit. Others realize too late. Either way, she transferred your money to him. That's a choice. Later that night, I sat at my desk and wrote out everything I now knew. I laid it out like a case study, like the data sets I'd analyzed 1,000 times before. Names, dates, accounts, behaviors, motives. Elena was no longer the enemy. She was a pawn in someone else's game, or perhaps in the end, a willing partner. Miguel, though. Miguel was the architect, and I had no intention of letting him continue this unchecked. Not just for me, not just for the money, but for every woman he had manipulated, and every person he might one day target, because the moment justice becomes personal, it stops being optional. The next step wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Miguel had exploited people with surgical precision for years, hiding behind a glossy mask of spiritual jargon and emotional seduction. Elena had walked into his trap willingly or blindly, but the trail they left behind was no longer in their control, and now it was mine to hand over. I met with my attorney, Luis Navarro, in his downtown office overlooking the bay. The glass walls, leather chairs, and shelves lined with legal volumes created a calm formality, perfect for the kind of surgical strike I needed. I handed Luis the envelope from Marisol, along with digital copies of everything. He took his time, reviewing it. His eyebrows slowly rose and he exhaled through his nose when he reached the email with Elena's promise to Miguel. "This changes the game," he said simply. He began outlining our options, tapping his pen against the folder. "First, we can proceed with the divorce as planned, using this as leverage for asset division. Second, we can file criminal charges against both Elena and Miguel. Third, we can use this information as pressure. Negotiate a settlement that ensures you recover most of your money and protect yourself legally." I leaned forward. "What about Miguel's other victims?" Luis paused. "If we can connect the dots and they're willing to share their evidence, we can build a pattern. That's how you make it bigger than a personal dispute. That's how you catch predators." I nodded. "Then let's do both. I want the divorce clean and fast, but I also want this man exposed." Within a week, Luis contacted 2 of Miguel's previous victims. After reassurance and discretion, both agreed to share their stories and documentation. One through an affidavit, the other through direct communication with my legal team. What emerged was a blueprint of exploitation. Different women, different cities, but the same financial bleeding and emotional manipulation, always ending with Miguel disappearing just before legal consequences could catch up. Luis compiled the evidence into a master file. Bank records, forged signatures, correspondence between Elena and Miguel, testimonies from other victims, and Marisol's timeline of transactions. The file was massive, precise, and damning. The divorce hearing was scheduled for the 2nd week of April. The court was neutral and modern, with a quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. I arrived early. Elena came in 5 minutes before the session began, walking beside Miguel. Yes, he came. It was as if they didn't understand the gravity of the situation, or perhaps they believed their narrative was still believable. Elena wore a conservative dress and minimal makeup, trying to blend back into the role of the wronged wife. Miguel wore a tailored blazer and smug confidence. But all of that melted once the judge entered. An older woman with silver-rimmed glasses and an expression that revealed nothing. She opened the file Luis had submitted and began the session formally. "Mr. Morales, I understand you've submitted additional evidence in this case related to financial misconduct. Is that correct?" Luis stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We are submitting documentation indicating systematic fraud, including the illegal transfer of marital assets, the use of forged authorization documents, and the involvement of a third party, Mr. Miguel Carrillo Reyna, in what we believe constitutes financial exploitation." Elena's hands gripped the edge of the table. Miguel's smile faded. The judge examined the evidence with methodical precision. Screenshots, financial logs, affidavits, the video Elena had sent me from the penthouse, her voice echoing in that quiet courtroom. I've already moved the funds, played like a confession with perfect clarity. Miguel shifted uncomfortably, whispered something to his attorney. The judge raised a hand to silence them. This court takes financial misconduct very seriously, she said. While divorce proceedings typically focus on civil matters, the evidence presented here extends beyond marital disagreements. Then she turned to Miguel directly. Mr. Reyna, this court has evidence suggesting a pattern of behavior that may constitute financial exploitation and conspiracy. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for further criminal investigation. A beat of silence. Elena looked at Miguel, stunned. His jaw tightened. Furthermore, the judge continued, all disputed marital assets are to be frozen immediately pending final resolution. No further withdrawals, transfers, or expenditures may occur from any account tied to either party or their related entities. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of the judge writing. Elena tried to speak. Your Honor, The judge cut her off. Mrs. Morales, I advise you to speak through your attorney. She sat back, visibly shaken. The confident influencer, who once built her brand on empowerment and abundance, now looked like a woman who had bet everything and lost. The hearing concluded with one final blow. Luis submitted a motion requesting restitution, supported by evidence that Elena had not only transferred joint funds, but had done so under the influence and instruction of a known financial predator. We walked out of that courtroom not with joy, but with confirmation. The system had worked, the evidence had spoken, and the consequences had finally begun to take shape. Outside, I glanced once at Miguel as he stood alone, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling someone to clean up the mess. Elena didn't look at me. She couldn't. I didn't need a final word. I didn't need revenge. I had something far better. Proof. In the months that followed the hearing, my life didn't snap back into place. It unfolded, carefully, quietly, and on my own terms. There was no cinematic closure, no sudden wave of relief. What came instead was a slow, deliberate rebuilding, the kind of progress that doesn't demand attention but grows stronger every day. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was patching up someone else's chaos. I was building something entirely mine. I moved out of the old house in San Diego. Too many echoes, too many shadows of things that no longer had weight. I found a 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the water in Seattle, a city I'd always admired for its calm, energy, and its sense of distance from everything. From there, I worked remotely, focused entirely on expanding the fintech consultancy I had once built in the margins of my life. Without the emotional noise, I discovered how much more I could do. Business grew, clients grew, and slowly, so did. The court ruled in my favor on nearly every point. Elena was ordered to make restitution, payments scheduled monthly for the next several years. It wasn't the full amount, but it was enough. Enough to reset, enough to remind her that actions leave ripples. Her attorney negotiated a reduced penalty in exchange for her cooperation in the criminal case against Miguel, who, by then, had fled California. But Marisol and Luis, working with the DA's office, had already built a timeline strong enough to trigger a multi-state investigation. A federal warrant followed soon after. Last I heard, he had been located in a small town, outside Merida under another name. Extradition was underway. Elena, meanwhile, tried to rebrand herself, first as a victim, then as a woman who had been spiritually misled. But the online world she once thrived in turned cold. Screenshots of her messages, clips of her penthouse, video, and the court's findings had quietly circulated among her former community. She lost partnerships, followers, credibility. She moved back to Santa Fe, where she took a lower-level job at a local wellness studio. Quiet, anonymous, diminished. I didn't celebrate her fall. I didn't need to. It wasn't my job to punish her. My job was to heal. And healing for me came not from forgetting, but from remembering who I was before all of this. I started hiking again, something I hadn't done since my early 30s. I reconnected with friends I'd lost track of, and in one of those quiet conversations I met someone, Sophie. She wasn't dramatic or dazzling, She was grounded, curious, a project manager in cybersecurity with a sharp mind and a habit of telling the truth even when it was inconvenient. We weren't rushing. Neither of us had anything to prove. We were two people with some history behind us, sitting in the present, slowly deciding if we wanted to walk forward together. One evening, we were having dinner on the balcony, and she asked me gently, "Do you regret it, staying as long as you did with Elena?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "No," I said, "because it taught me how to never lose myself again." And that was the truth. I didn't regret the past. I regretted how long I ignored my instincts, how often I chose silence over curiosity, peace over truth. But I didn't regret learning the difference. And I didn't regret reclaiming the man I had almost allowed to disappear under the weight of someone else's needs. There's a framed photo I keep on my desk now, not of Elena, but of me, about a year before our marriage began. I'm standing in front of my first office, tired, proud, hungry for growth. It reminds me that I existed before her and I exist after. Fully, completely, quietly powerful. Justice didn't roar. It didn't need to. It arrived like I did, prepared, principled and patient. And this time I wasn't the one who didn't see it coming. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about clarity, about what happens when you stop making excuses for patterns that don't align with your values. David's story reminds us that trust isn't about giving someone unchecked access to your heart or your finances. It's about building a system of mutual accountability, where respect and honesty are not just expected but verified. Too often, people stay quiet in the face of discomfort, convincing themselves that love requires endurance at the cost of self-awareness. But true strength lies not in how long you tolerate the wrong things. It lies in how clearly you see when something no longer serves your life. Whether it's a marriage, a business deal, or a friendship, always listen to what the inconsistencies are trying to tell you. Because the truth rarely screams, it whispers. And the sooner you hear it, the sooner you can act with power and purpose. What's the hardest truth you've had to accept in order to protect your peace? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. If this story resonated with you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life lessons told with truth, clarity, and purpose.